She turned off the lights, then became the nightmare in the dark. At the Everett Marine Terminal, Colin Sullivan had Roman tied to a chair and 20 armed men guarding the warehouse. He thought Amelia was too big, too emotional. Too late, then the power died. The doors exploded open. Her team moved in night vision while Sullivan's men fired blind into the dark. And through the smoke came Amelia Hastings, carrying a machine gun like judgment itself. Every man who laughed at her size finally understood. They had not underestimated a woman. They had underestimated a war machine. The first time Roman Caldwell truly saw Amelia Hastings, she was on the marble floor with blood running down her arm and an unconscious assassin trapped beneath her knee. Seconds earlier, every man in that hallway had treated her like dead weight. Now those same men stood frozen, their expensive suits useless, their hands too slow, their pride suddenly very quiet. Amelia had spent years being ignored because she did not look like their idea of danger. They laughed at her body, her clothes, her silence, and the way she kept her eyes lowered when they tried to provoke her. Understood was that silence had made her sharper. While they posed in mirrors and bragged about training, she studied exits, camera delays, nervous hands, shifting faces, and the small mistakes people make before violence begins. Amelia had already seen the threat coming. Amelia worked in the security control room of the Obsidian Lounge, a private underground club hidden beneath a luxury hotel on the Boston waterfront. No windows. Only steel doors, humming servers, and 48 monitors that washed everything in a cold blue light. It always smelled of burnt coffee, warm electronics, and too much cheap cologne from the men who drifted in and out to mock her. Amelia was 5'9" and weighed 260 pounds, and in that polished, male-dominated world, that was enough to make her a target. The other guards were former military types in fitted black suits, men who walked like they expected applause. Amelia wore loose cargo pants and a plain polo shirt because she cared more about movement than appearance. To them, that made her an easy joke. To her, it made them predictable. The loudest of them was Johnson, a huge guard with a thick neck, a polished watch, and the kind of confidence that needed constant witnesses. He liked to wait until the room was full before turning Amelia into the punchline. At noon, he leaned against the console and asked if her chair was reinforced or if the wheels were about to collapse under her. A few men laughed because laughing was easier than thinking for themselves. Amelia did not look away from the monitors. The screen light caught the tired calm in her face as she said, "The chair is fine, Johnson." And she pointed to camera 4 and told him its motor was lagging, leaving a 3-second blind spot near the service elevator. The laughter thinned. Johnson adjusted his watch and tried to smirk, but everyone had heard it. She had just found something he missed. Johnson snapped that she should move aside and let the real men handle security. Amelia let the insult hang in the air and then pass. She had learned years ago that arguing with men like Johnson only fed them. They did not want truth. They wanted a reaction they could laugh at later, so she gave them nothing. Instead, she turned their contempt into her. If they wanted to pretend she was invisible, she would become invisible on purpose. Amelia memorized the rhythm of the building. She knew which door hinges squealed, which cameras drifted, which guards lied on patrol reports, and which wealthy guests smiled too hard when they were afraid. She studied Roman Caldwell's empire from underneath it, piece by piece, until the hidden shape of it began to appear. None of the men noticed. That was their first mistake. Roman Caldwell was 34 years old, calm in a way that made people nervous, and dangerous in a way that did not need loud threats. He had built his coastal crime empire through patience, money, fear, and the careful removal of anyone who mistook his quietness for weakness. Men lowered their voices when they said his name, because stories followed him like smoke. That night, Roman was coming to the Obsidian Lounge for a meeting with the Sullivan family, a rival Irish crew that controlled pieces of the harbor he wanted. Officially, it was negotiation. Everyone who understood Roman knew it was closer to surrender. At exactly 11:45 p.m., 3 black SUVs rolled into the loading dock. In the control room, Amelia leaned toward the screens. Men behind her were talking. She stopped hearing them. Roman had entered the building, and every mistake suddenly mattered. On the monitors, Simon Fletcher led the security formation around Roman. Simon was head of elite protection, a handsome man with cold eyes and perfect cufflinks, the sort of man who believed rank could replace awareness. Anyone else, the formation looked clean. To Amelia, it looked wrong. Simon walked too far ahead, leaving Roman's left side exposed near the heavy stone pillars that lined the VIP hallway. That gap would last only seconds, but seconds were enough. Amelia switched camera angles, checked the service corridor, and keyed her radio. She warned the team about the blind side near Pillar 6. Simon's reply came back sharp and irritated. He told her to shut her mouth and stay off the channel. Amelia felt anger rise, then pressed it down. Hurt pride could wait. A hallway with a blind spot could not. She shifted focus to the service corridor, where staff moved in and out with trays of champagne, whiskey, and untouched food for men who were too tense to eat. On screen 12, a new busboy caught her attention. His uniform was correct, his pace was almost normal, but his right arm stayed locked against his ribs, as if he were holding something heavy beneath the white jacket. Amelia enlarged the image. His jaw was tight. His eyes did not move like staff. Staff looked for spills, doors, and impatient guests. This man looked for angles. She ran his face through the employee database. The system did not return a mismatch. It returned an error. Amelia's stomach dropped. Not staff, not cleared. Too close to the VIP hallway. She hit the emergency button so hard the plastic edge cracked beneath her palm. A red alert flashed across the monitors. Amelia shouted into her headset that a gunman was approaching service door B. Simon's voice cut across the radio, furious and dismissive, telling her to stop clogging the channel. Something inside Amelia went still. She had spent years waiting for permission from people who enjoyed denying it. She was done waiting. She ripped off the headset, grabbed her heavy metal flashlight and her standard 9mm handgun, then shoved through the control room door. The fire door slammed behind her. As she ran down the concrete corridor, she could hear the alarm now, muffled but growing louder. When she reached the VIP hallway, the fake busboy stepped out from an alcove. His white jacket opened. A silenced submachine gun rose in his hands, aimed straight at Roman Caldwell's chest. Simon and Johnson reacted too late. For all their training, all their muscle, all their rehearsed confidence, they froze at the 1 second that mattered. Roman Caldwell stood exposed, surrounded by men who suddenly looked like decorations. Amelia had no clean shot. Too many bodies, too much movement, too little time. So she made the only choice left. She threw herself between Roman and the weapon, turning her body into the barrier everyone else had failed to provide. The first round tore through her upper arm. Pain flashed hot and white, then disappeared beneath the hard rush of adrenaline. She kept moving, not beautifully, not like an action hero. She hit the assassin with the full force of a woman who had been underestimated for so long that no one had ever prepared for what would happen when she stopped holding back. The impact drove the assassin backward. Amelia slammed into him hard enough to knock him off his feet, and the gun kicked upward, firing into the ceiling instead of Roman's body. Plastered dust rained down. Men shouted. Amelia landed on top of the shooter and pinned his arm before he could bring the weapon back down. He fought hard, twisting beneath her, stronger than he looked, desperate enough to be dangerous. Amelia drove her knee into his leg with brutal precision. The joint gave way, and his scream cut through the alarm. She did not stop to enjoy it. She raised the metal flashlight and struck him across the temple. His body went slack beneath her. For one strange moment, the hallway fell into a stunned silence broken only by Amelia's breathing, rough and uneven, and the alarm pulsing through the walls. Amelia pushed herself up slowly. Blood ran down her arm and dripped onto the polished white marble. Simon stared at her, as if his mind refused to accept what his eyes had seen. Johnson stood behind him, mouth slightly open, one hand still hovering near the weapon he had never drawn in time. Roman did not move at first. His gaze traveled from the unconscious assassin to the useless guards, then stopped on Amelia. She looked nothing like the people he usually trusted with his life. Her hair had slipped loose from its tie. Her shirt was stained. Her face was pale, sweaty, and steady. Men in that hallway looked at her without amusement. Roman's voice was low when he asked, "Who are you?" Amelia almost laughed. After years of being visible only as a joke, now he wanted her name. Simon recovered first because men like him always tried to control the story before truth settled. He called Amelia a basement rat and claimed he had the situation contained. The words sounded thin even before he finished them. Roman turned his head slowly and Simon stopped smiling. Roman described the failure with surgical calm. The defense team had left a blind spot wide enough for an armed hitman, to come within 15 feet of the principal. Simon had ignored a live warning. The only person who moved in time was the woman he had told to stay silent. Simon protested that Amelia had broken protocol. Roman stepped closer and said protocol was not a shield for incompetence. He walked past Simon and stopped in front of Amelia. She could feel everyone watching, but for once, their attention did not feel like mockery. It felt like danger changing direction. Roman asked if she had been shot. Amelia looked down at her arm as though noticing it for the first time, and said it was only a graze. It was not. The wound burned through her sleeve, and her fingers had started to tremble. But Amelia had spent most of her life treating pain as a private matter. Complaining had never made anyone kinder. Roman studied her with unsettling focus. He asked how she knew the man was a threat. Amelia gave him the facts without drama. Wrong gait. Locked arm. Weight under the jacket. Database error. Timing near service door B. She did not ask for credit. She did not mention Simon ignoring her. She simply explained what she had seen. Roman listened. That was the first thing about him that frightened her. When Roman Caldwell truly listened, it meant he was deciding what someone was worth. By morning, Roman had transferred Amelia into his Tier 1 security squad. The announcement moved through the building like a cold draft. Simon Fletcher looked ready to break his teeth from clenching his jaw. Johnson said she would never survive field work. Not with her body, not with her stamina, not with the pace real guards had to keep. Roman stepped close enough to make Johnson look down. He reminded him that Amelia had taken down an active shooter, while Johnson was still reaching for his weapon. Then he told him to shut up. Amelia did not smile. She knew better than to mistake Romanesque defense for kindness. He had not rescued her from cruelty. He had discovered a use for her. In Romanesque world, value was protection, but it was also a leash. She felt both settle around her at once. The Tier 1 armory was worse than she expected. The quartermaster handed her a tactical vest several sizes too small, and said they did not carry maternity cuts. A few men laughed under their breath. Amelia held the vest in both hands, feeling the cheapness of the insult more than the weight of the gear. It would have been easy to throw it back, to demand respect, to give them the reaction they wanted. Instead, she took it home. Her South Boston apartment was small, quiet, and lit by the yellow lamp beside her kitchen table. She laid the vest out, opened a drawer full of tools, and worked until the sky began to pale. She cut nylon, extended straps, reinforced seams, and fitted custom ceramic plates into a frame that finally matched her body. It was not elegant, it was hers. Next day, Johnson and the others tried to break her at the range and on the obstacle course. They expected her to fail loudly, to give them a story they could repeat for months. Amelia failed quietly at first. She missed a climb. She caught her breath too hard after a sprint. Her injured arm protested every movement. The men smiled when they saw it. Then she adjusted. She changed her footing, changed her breathing, used her weight for leverage instead of fighting it. At the firing line, the room changed. Heavy automatic weapons that pushed smaller men off balance settled against her shoulder as if they belonged there. Her shots grouped tight. Recoil that rattled Johnson barely moved her. The laughter thinned again. Amelia did not look back at them. She did not need applause. Their silence was enough. Simon Fletcher watched her success with a face that grew colder by the hour. He could handle a weak woman he could humiliate. He could handle a lucky woman he could dismiss. What he could not handle was a woman whose competence made his authority look fragile. So he stopped attacking openly and began arranging small failures. Moved her posts without telling her, and sent her into assignments with outdated maps. He wanted her late, confused, and exposed. Amelia noticed every change. She had spent too much of her life surviving people who smiled while setting traps. Instead of confronting Simon, she documented everything. Then, one long night in Roman's armored car, she broke into Simon's private server. What she found there was bigger than sabotage. Simon was not only petty, he was dirty. The server opened into schedules, payment records, private messages, and security reports Simon had never expected anyone beneath him to read. Amelia moved through them carefully, copying files, tracing edits, and comparing patrol times against actual camera logs. During those weeks, she spent long hours beside Roman, in the back of his armored car, silent except when he asked a direct question. Roman began to prefer her silence to the noise of his other guards. Loud men were easy to understand. Amelia was not. She watched the city through tinted glass, eyes moving constantly, mind always working. One rainy afternoon by the harbor, Roman finally asked if she hated the men who had humiliated her. Amelia watched the rain streak down the window before answering. "Weak men," she said, "become cruel when they feel power moving away from them." Roman looked at her for a long moment. He had expected bitterness. What he heard was analysis. He asked why someone with her mind would choose the underworld when she could have worked in some clean corporate office. Amelia gave a small smile with no warmth in it. Corporate offices, she said, had their own kind of violence. Polished smiles, thin compliments, locked doors, interviews that ended the second people saw her, managers who praised confidence, but only when it came in the right body. Woman's world was uglier, but it was honest about being ugly. A bullet did not pretend to be kindness. A threat did not ask you to call it professionalism. In the underworld, survival mattered more than looking acceptable, and Amelia hated how much that mattered to her. When Roman warned her that Simon was searching for a reason to remove her, Amelia did not look surprised. She handed him a folder instead. Inside were 6 months of security budgets, payroll records, GPS logs, and patrol gaps. Simon had created 10 fake employees and pocketed their paychecks, leaving entire sections of the perimeter understaffed. Roman flipped through the evidence in silence. Amelia explained each piece cleanly, without anger. Every missing guard had created a blind spot. Every blind spot had made Roman easier to kill. The upcoming summit at the Navy Yard was supposed to bring the Sullivan family to the table. Amelia believed Simon had already turned it into something else. She did not say she was afraid. She said the layout felt too convenient. Roman's eyes sharpened. He liked traps only when he was the one setting them. Roman asked why she was telling him instead of using it to ruin Simon quietly. Amelia held his gaze. Because if Simon had sold one piece of the operation, he might have sold the whole route to the Navy Yard. Because Roman's flank would be open. Because an ambitious man trying to hide theft often became useful to enemies who offered protection. Another one she did not say. Roman had seen her when everyone else had looked through her. That did not make him safe, but it had created a debt in the most wounded part of her. She told herself it was loyalty to the job. She told herself she would have done the same for any principal. Even as she thought it, she knew it was not entirely true. Roman did not cancel the Navy Yard summit. That should have warned her more than it did. He decided to attend, not because he trusted the situation, but because he wanted to watch the betrayal reveal itself. The meeting site was an abandoned section of harbor filled with rusted containers, broken floodlights, and warehouses that had not legally operated in years. Wind came off the water hard enough to cut through coats. Simon reported that the perimeter was clear, and the Sullivan representatives were waiting inside Warehouse 4. His voice sounded smooth, rehearsed, and false. The other guards accepted it because believing the job was simple made them feel safer. Amelia did not. She scanned rooftops, windows, crane housings, stacked containers, and the shadowed gaps between them. The silence did not feel empty. It felt arranged. Amelia warned that there were no snipers on the east roof, which made no sense for a secure meeting. Simon laughed over the radio and called her an armchair general. Roman kept walking. That was Roman's gift and his curse. He could move through fear, as if fear belonged to other people. And most of the time, the world bent around that confidence. Amelia stayed close, her custom armor heavy against her ribs. Her injured arm ached beneath the cold. She watched the angles shift as Roman approached Warehouse 4. The shadows near the crane housing were too dense. The containers created firing lanes no competent team would leave open. Roman reached for the door handle. Amelia saw a tiny flash of light 50 yards away. It lasted less than a second, but her body moved before the thought finished. Sniper scope. Amelia shouted and grabbed Roman by the coat, yanking him backward with everything she had. A high-caliber round missed his head by inches and sparked against the steel door behind him. Then the yard exploded. Gunfire came from 3 directions at once, turning the open space into a kill box. Johnson went down first. The other guards scattered, all that expensive posture vanishing under real pressure. Amelia had no time to feel satisfaction. She was already counting shooters, positions, distance to cover, distance to the armored car, and the terrible fact that Simon had gone silent. Roman ordered Simon to return fire. Static answered. Amelia understood the betrayal in one clean, bitter instant. Simon had not simply fled. He had given the Sullivans their layout, their blind spots, and their panic pattern. They were pinned behind a rusted forklift that shook under the impact of incoming rounds. Roman wanted to run for the armored car 30 yards away, but Amelia saw the firing lanes and knew he would die halfway there. She spotted another route, narrow and ugly, near the crane housing, a service access leading down into maintenance tunnels beneath the yard. Roman called it a death trap. Amelia told him staying where they were gave them 30 seconds. Maybe less. She was not being brave. She was doing math with death closing in. Survival rarely offered a clean path. Sometimes it offered a worse path that was at least still a path. And the forklift began to break apart. Amelia shoved Roman toward the tunnel entrance and stepped into the line of fire. The same body they had mocked became the shield that kept Roman alive. A heavy round struck Amelia in the back and drove the air from her lungs. Her custom ceramic plate held, but pain burst through her ribs so sharply her vision blurred. She stayed upright. She fired back through smoke and rain, buying Roman 3 more steps, then 5, then 10. Roman shouted her name, and for the first time, his voice sounded stripped of command. Amelia turned to retreat. Another bullet tore through her thigh. Her leg folded beneath her, and she hit the wet pavement hard. The shooters advanced, sensing weakness. Then Roman did something no one expected from him. He stepped into the open, grabbed her vest, and dragged her backward under fire. Roman pulled Amelia behind cover, as bullets chewed up the ground where she had fallen. His expensive coat was soaked, torn, and smeared with grime. He pressed both hands to her thigh wound, trying to stop the bleeding. For a man who built his life on control, his hands shook badly enough for her to notice. He called her crazy and stupid under his breath, but the words sounded more like fear than anger. Amelia tried to joke that her size made her useful as a shield. Roman snapped that she was not dying in some dirty tunnel. He lifted her with a harsh grunt and forced himself toward the maintenance entrance. Amelia, half conscious, felt the strange humiliation and relief of being carried. For once, someone else held her weight without turning it into a joke. The tunnel beneath the Navy Yard was freezing, narrow and black except for the pale light from Roman's phone. Water splashed around his shoes as he carried her through it, cursing Simon Fletcher with every breath. Amelia's head rested against his shoulder. Her thigh throbbed. Her ribs felt cracked from the impact against her armor. She should have been thinking about the pain, but her mind kept returning to the radios. Simon knew their frequencies. If he had compromised the main channel, he could still track survivors, reroute backup, or feed false instructions to anyone trying to rescue them. Amelia forced her eyes open and told Roman. He stared down at her, stunned that she was still working the problem while bleeding through his hands. Amelia had always survived by staying useful, even near collapse. She did not know how to stop. They climbed out through a harbor grate onto a wet service road, where Roman's hidden bulletproof Audi waited beneath the rain. Inside, Roman became frighteningly efficient. He tied a tourniquet, packed her wound with combat gauze, checked her pupils, and kept ordering her to stay awake. Amelia watched him through the haze of pain and saw the contradiction clearly. He was saving her life. He was also trying to take control back from a night that had humiliated him. 40 minutes later, they reached a basement clinic under an abandoned office building. Dr. Harrison Reed, a disgraced trauma surgeon with debts to dangerous men, took one look at Amelia and moved fast. Roman refused to leave the operating table. Reed told him to step back. Roman did not move. For once, he looked less like a king than a man afraid to lose something he had not meant to care about. When Reed cut away Amelia's armor, the room went quiet. A massive bruise spread across her chest, where the sniper round had struck the ceramic plate. The armor she had rebuilt at her kitchen table had saved her life. Her frame had absorbed force that might have killed someone smaller, and Amelia knew he understood. The body everyone mocked had kept him alive twice. That should have felt like victory. Instead, it made her tired. Being seen only after bleeding for someone was not the same as being valued. Reed stitched the wound in her thigh while Amelia clenched her teeth and stayed nearly silent. The silence did not mean the pain was small. It meant she had learned long ago not to give pain an audience. Reed ordered her to stay in bed for at least a week. Amelia refused before he finished speaking. Simon had their ledger, the security routes, the radio structure, and enough information to tear Roman's empire open from the inside. Roman said he would handle Simon alone. Amelia looked at him through exhaustion and told him he barely knew how to use a computer. She was the one who had built a backdoor into Simon's network 3 months earlier, back when everyone thought she was only checking camera logs. Roman stared at her, then stepped closer and brushed damp hair from her face. The gesture was gentle, almost careful. That made it more dangerous. Amelia could not tell whether he was touching her because he cared, because he needed her, or because Roman Caldwell never let a valuable thing drift beyond reach. By sunrise, Roman had named Amelia head of security and second in command of his protection structure. The title carried through the penthouse base like a warning shot. Men who used to laugh at her now watched their mouths. Amelia sat in the center of the war room, with her injured leg propped on a velvet chair and her crutches leaning nearby. She looked out of place among the tailored suits and polished weapons, but no one questioned her place now. That did not make the room feel kind. Respect born from fear has a different temperature. It is colder, cleaner, easier to lose. Roman stood behind her chair with one hand resting on it, a silent claim disguised as protection. Amelia noticed. She noticed everything. She also noticed that she did not move away. Amelia traced Simon's digital trail through shell companies, false payroll accounts, encrypted messages, and transfer routes hidden behind Panamanian paperwork. His mistake, she explained, was vanity. He did not only want to steal, he wanted to admire the shape of his own cleverness, and that made patterns. Roman's remaining inner circle watched in silence as Amelia moved through systems none of them understood. Finally, she found Simon at Hanscom Field, Hangar 4. With a private flight to Buenos Aires scheduled to leave in 45 minutes. $30 million in cash had been loaded onto the plane. Simon thought distance would turn betrayal into escape. Roman pulled out his custom 1911 pistol, his expression empty. Amelia saw the hunt settle over him. She had not simply found Simon. She had handed Roman the pleasure of closing the trap. Amelia's leg was badly damaged, but she demanded to go on the raid. Simon had called her useless, slow, and weak for months. Even after everything she had done, some bruised part of her wanted to stand in front of him and make him see that he had been wrong. Roman saw that need at once. His smile was not tender. It was the look of a man who had found the exact lever inside someone. He allowed her to come, not because it was safe, but because her need to prove herself made her obedient. Amelia knew that. She was smart enough to see it and wounded enough to climb into the SUV anyway. That was the uncomfortable truth she did not want to name. Approval can feel like warmth when someone has spent too long in the cold. Rain hammered the runway as 3 armored trucks smashed through the airport fence and boxed in Simon's private plane. Roman kept Amelia in the SUV, close enough to watch but not close enough to act freely. Simon's hired guards surrendered almost immediately. They had been paid to stand near danger, not die for a man already losing. Simon stepped into the rain beside the open cargo hold, his expensive suit soaked, his face stripped of all the arrogance he had worn so easily in the control room. He offered Roman the full $30 million in exchange for his life. Roman looked at him as if the offer were insulting. The money already belonged to him, he said. Simon finally understood that greed had given him cash, but not loyalty, courage, or anyone willing to stand between him and consequence. Then Amelia opened the SUV door and stepped into the rain. Every step hurt. Her crutch slipped once on the wet pavement, but she caught herself and kept moving. Simon's face changed when he saw her. Disgust came from first, because that was the habit he reached for when afraid. Then came something better, recognition. She was not the woman in the basement anymore. She was wounded, soaked, and exhausted, but the entire armed line shifted to make space for her. Simon tried to mock her body, her limp, the way she held her handgun balanced against the crutch. Amelia let the insults pass. They sounded old now, almost childish. His voice no longer had the power to define her. The man who once controlled her schedule was standing under her aim, and both of them knew it. Simon shouted louder, desperate to drag her back into the old room, where he had power and she had to swallow humiliation to keep working. Amelia looked past him at the plane, and said it was too heavy to take off. Too much cash, too much fuel, too much panic. The simple calculation humiliated him more deeply than rage would have. Simon's face twisted. In one last attempt to seize the moment, he reached for his gun. Amelia did not warn him. She did not give a speech about justice. She fired. The 9mm round shattered his kneecap and dropped him into a puddle of rainwater and jet fuel. He screamed, clutching his leg. Amelia looked down at him without pleasure. She told him he had been right about one thing. She was not built to run away. Amelia stepped aside and let Roman finish Simon. It looked like loyalty. It was also an offering. Roman watched her with something close to admiration, but admiration from Roman always carried ownership inside it. He called her his shield, then shot Simon dead without hesitation. The execution ended a betrayal, but the moment after mattered more. Roman took Amelia's gun from her hand and slipped it into his waistband. It was subtle enough that no one else questioned it. Amelia noticed. The gesture said he would protect her, but it also said he would decide when she held power and when she handed it back. Then he lifted her into his arms, instead of letting her use her crutches. The men saw tenderness. Amelia, exhausted and aching, wanted it to be tenderness too. Wanting made it harder to see the cage. 6 months later, Amelia had become the iron gatekeeper of Roman Caldwell's empire. She rebuilt the crew from the ground up, replacing loud, flashy thugs with quiet professionals who followed procedure because they respected competence and feared the consequences of laziness. Every route was checked twice. Every payroll entry matched a real body. Every camera had redundancy. Every guard knew that if Amelia asked a question, she already had part of the answer. Johnson no longer joked when she entered a room. He lowered his eyes. That should have certified her. Sometimes it did. But power did not erase old wounds. It only gave them better furniture. Amelia had taken the rejection of her past and turned it into structure, discipline, and control. The empire became safer, not become softer. The most dangerous changes happened behind closed doors. Roman learned where her armor was thinnest. He did not need to threaten her. Threats were crude. Pray worked better. At 2 a.m. in his penthouse, with the city glittering below them, and 25-year-old Scotch untouched between them, he sat close enough to make the silence feel intimate. Amelia tried to keep the conversation on business, explaining Colin Sullivan's weakening supply lines and the pressure building around the docks. Roman took the tablet from her hands and set it aside. Then his fingers touched the scar near her collarbone, the mark left by the sniper round that had almost killed her at the Navy Yard. Amelia froze. He was not only touching skin, he was touching memory. Blood, pain, rescue, debt. Roman knew exactly what he was doing. On the streets, Amelia had become terrifying. In that room, with Roman's voice low and close, she was still painfully human. He cupped her jaw and told her he loved her. He said the rest of the world had been too shallow to see her, that everyone else was polished, fake, and empty. But she was real. She was the only person who had ever truly protected him. The words landed exactly where she was weakest. Roman turned the bullet she had taken into proof of devotion instead of what it also was, a near-death sacrifice inside a criminal war. Amelia wanted to believe him. Wanting made her tired. It was easier to sink into the warmth of being chosen than to ask why being chosen always seemed to require bleeding first. Roman told her she was not like other women. Not decorative, not fragile, not built for anyone else's approval. He called her powerful, rare, a queen. To someone who had spent years bracing for disgust, that kind of praise felt almost impossible to resist. When he kissed her, it carried heat, relief, and something sharper underneath. It felt less like love arriving than possession taking a softer shape. Amelia held his shoulders and let her defenses loosen. She told herself this was what trust felt like. She told herself Roman had seen the part of her everyone else had rejected. Maybe that was true. Give me the phone, Sophia. Maybe it was also true that he had learned how to make a cage feel like shelter by building it out of the exact words she had been waiting to hear. Colin Sullivan understood something Simon never had. He could not beat Amelia by mocking her or forcing a direct confrontation. She was too prepared, too watchful, too hard to surprise in any ordinary way. So he went around her. He hired Wyatt Mitchell, a corrupt federal agent with enough credentials to make danger look official, and arranged an off-the-books meeting at the Copley Plaza Hotel, under the cover of a plea discussion. Amelia warned Roman the setup felt wrong. The details were too neat. The location was too public. The timing came too soon after the docks began tightening around Sullivan's shipments. Roman listened, then walked into it anyway. His ego could accept enemies. It could not accept the idea that visibility did not equal control. Amelia should have pushed harder. Later, that thought would cut deeper than any bullet. Roman entered the Copley Plaza like a man still convinced the board belonged to him. He believed the crowd protected him. He believed the federal angle made the meeting predictable. He believed, most dangerously, that Amelia's caution could be managed from a distance. She remained 2 blocks away in a surveillance van, surrounded by screens, radios, and the stale smell of old coffee. Before he went inside, Roman had touched her shoulder and whispered that trust mattered. It sounded intimate. It also kept her where he wanted her. She watched him cross the lobby with 4 elite guards, close enough on the feed to see the set of his shoulders, too far away to reach him with her own hands. For someone whose entire gift was seeing danger early, being forced to watch from a distance felt like a punishment. Roman reached the 5th floor. Amelia's instincts tightened. She scanned the camera feeds, searching for the wrong detail, because danger rarely announced itself. On camera 3, a bellhop moved near the private conference doors wearing military combat boots. The uniform was good. The shoes were wrong. More importantly, his posture was wrong. He carried himself like someone trained to enter rooms under fire. Amelia shouted into the comms for Roman to stop. The warning came too late. Heavy oak doors slammed shut. Fire alarms screamed. The hotel began locking down in sections, floor by floor, like a machine closing its jaws. Amelia slammed her hand against the console. She could see it. That was the cruelty of it. She could see the trap forming in real time. And for once, seeing was not enough. Glass shattered across the 5th floor as heavily armed mercenaries burst through the windows. Colin had not come to negotiate. He had come to take Roman alive. Roman guards fought back, but the ambush was too tight and too fast. The feed shook, blurred and filled with smoke, before dissolving into static. Amelia's breathing turned harsh. A dangerous second, panic rose so quickly it almost blinded her. Then she forced it down. Panic was a luxury. Moved across exterior cameras, traffic feeds, loading zones, service entrances. A laundry truck pulled away from the hotel too fast, cutting across a lane without headlights. Amelia followed it through the grid until the route became clear. Everett Marine Terminal. Her voice dropped so low, Johnson turned to look at her. "They took him," she said. It was not fear anymore. It was a promise. Johnson was losing control in the van, shouting half-formed orders, and waiting for permission from men who were no longer alive to give it. Amelia took command. She ordered every available soldier mobilized, rerouted teams through back roads, locked down known Sullivan exits, and pulled schematics for the Everett terminal before the first convoy even moved. As she strapped heavy armor over her chest, she understood exactly what she was doing. She was risking the whole operation for a man who had protected her, used her, praised her, and slowly tied her worth to his survival. That truth did not stop her. It made her angrier. She slammed a magazine into her rifle and said Colin thought he had cut off the head of the snake. But the look in her eyes said the body was already moving through the dark. At the shipyard, Roman was tied to a steel chair beneath a broken overhead light. His face was bruised, one eye swelling, blood at the corner of his mouth. Still, he looked bored enough to insult everyone in the room. Colin Sullivan paced in front of him, smoking one cigarette after another, trying to make nervous movement look like control. He mocked Roman for letting a woman run his security. Roman only smiled faintly. That quiet, unnerved Colin, more than begging would have. Roman did not plead, because pleading would have given Colin shape. Instead, he let Colin talk himself louder and weaker. When Colin punched him, Roman turned his head back slowly and told him he had not beaten him. He had only made Amelia angry. Amelia was already cutting the power grid open. Amelia did not rush blindly. That was what Colin expected from someone emotional. Instead, she used emotion as fuel and discipline as the steering wheel. She hacked the Terminal's old power system through a maintenance relay, then mapped heat signatures inside the warehouse from a stolen municipal scanner. 12 hostiles near the east wall, 4 around Roman, 2 elevated positions, 1 nervous man pissing likely Colin. She assigned entry teams, marked escape routes, and ordered the outer ring to take prisoners where possible, because information was worth more than corpses. Paused for 1 second in the rain, listening to her own heartbeat inside the helmet. She was afraid. That mattered. Fear meant she understood the cost. Then she gave the command, and the entire warehouse went black. Darkness swallowed the building. Colin S. men panicked immediately, swinging flashlights through smoke and shouting over one another. Amelia S. squad moved with night vision, quiet and precise. The main doors blew open with C4, and the blast rolled through the warehouse, shaking rust from the beams. The mercenaries realized too late that they had not trapped Roman. They had brought Amelia to them. Silenced shots cracked through the dark. Men dropped before they knew where the attack was coming from. The survivors fired blindly, hitting crates, pipes, concrete, anything but the people moving against them. Amelia stepped through the smoke. She was broad, armored, steady, and almost calm. There was no performance in her now. No need to prove anything. She had already decided what she was willing to lose, and that made her frightening. A stray bullet struck Amelia S. vest and drove her back half a step. She steadied herself and kept moving. The M249 in her hands roared, heavy and brutal, but she controlled it with the grounded stability the men at the range had once laughed at. The weapon tore through cover and broke the mercenary's nerve. Colin screamed for his men to shoot her. Two stepped out because they feared him more than they understood her. Amelia adjusted her aim and dropped them before they settled their sights. The room smelled of smoke, rain, hot metal, and fear. Roman, tied to the chair, watched her through blood and dust with something like pride on his face. That pride should have warmed her. Instead, somewhere deep down, it scared her. She was becoming exactly what he needed most. The remaining mercenaries ran for the exits and were captured by Amelia S. outside team before they made it 10 steps. The warehouse fell quiet except for rain beating against the roof. Colin stood alone, shaking with a gun pressed to Roman S. head. It was the last shape of power he had left, and even that looked unstable in his hand. Roman watched Amelia instead of the weapon. Colin wanted fear from him and got none. Amelia saw the tremor in Colin S. wrist, the angle of his elbow, the slight separation between his gun and Roman S. skull. She drew her handgun slowly. Her voice was flat when she told him to drop it. Colin screamed that he would kill Roman. Amelia did not argue. She did not soothe him. She raised her arm and let the room narrow to one shot. For one breath, everything held still. Roman's bruised face, Colin's shaking hand, rain on the roof, smoke drifting through the dark. Amelia whispered, bang. Then she fired from 20 feet away. The round struck Colin's gun dead on and shattered it from his grip. The force knocked him backward. He hit the floor screaming, clutching his ruined hand. But Amelia did not look at him. She went straight to Roman and cut through his restraints with quick, practiced movements. Roman stood slowly, bruised but alive, and looked at her with that familiar smirk. He told her she was late. It should have angered her. Instead, she almost smiled. That was the danger between them, into devotion with a single sentence, even after she had moved heaven and earth to save him. Colin was dragged away by Amelia's men, broken, furious, and no longer important. Roman stepped close to Amelia in front of the whole crew. He did not thank her privately. Roman understood theater. He embraced her where everyone could see, one hand at the back of her neck, the other pressed between her shoulder blades as if he were steadying her and claiming her at the same time. He told her she would never have to call him boss again. Then he announced that from that night forward, every soldier, driver, accountant, and captain in the organization would answer to her. The room shifted. Men who once would have ignored her now lowered their eyes. Amelia felt power move toward her like heat. She also felt the lock beneath it. Roman was giving her a throne built inside his kingdom. For a few weeks, Amelia let herself believe that power meant freedom. The operation ran cleaner than it ever had. Sullivan routes collapsed. Corrupt contacts disappeared from the payroll. The docks became quiet because everyone knew Amelia saw patterns before they became threats. Johnson asked permission before entering rooms she occupied. Men who had once laughed at her body now waited for her approval with their hands folded. There was satisfaction in that. Amelia would have been lying if she denied it. But at night, when the penthouse went silent and Roman S. hand settled at the small of her back during meetings, she began noticing how often her authority depended on his presence. They respected her because she was brilliant. They feared her because Roman had chosen her. And once she saw it, she could not stop seeing it. One night, after a meeting that ended with 3 captains dismissed and 1 shipping route burned to protect the organization, Amelia stayed behind in the war room. The city glittered beyond the glass, cold and unreachable. Roman poured scotch and told her she was magnificent. The old Amelia would have carried that word like a gift. This Amelia heard the shape of the hook beneath it. She asked him what would happen if she disagreed with him in front of the crew. Roman smiled as if the question amused him. He said she would never need to. Amelia looked at him then, really looked. The man who had carried her through freezing tunnels was also the man who could not imagine her power existing outside his own. Love, if that was what he felt, still wanted a chain. That realization did not make Amelia stop loving him. It made things worse. Simple hatred would have been easy. Roman was not simple. He had saved her life. He had seen her intelligence. He had defended her when others laughed. He had also used every wound he found and turned each one into loyalty. Amelia understood systems, and now she was trapped inside the hardest one she had ever mapped. Her own need to be valued. She began keeping a second set of files, not to betray him, but to understand the full shape of the empire without Roman's hand guiding what she saw. Backup accounts, hidden exits, private leverage, safe routes for people who had served her honestly. Amelia wanted to know where the hinges were. Roman noticed changes slowly, then all at once. Amelia still stood beside him. She still protected him. She still read threats before anyone else. But she no longer leaned into every word of praise. She no longer softened when he called her his shield. One evening, after a captain failed to report a contact with federal pressure, Roman ordered a punishment meant to scare the room. Amelia stopped him in front of everyone. The silence that followed was enormous. Johnson stared at the floor. The captains barely breathed. Roman turned toward her, his expression smooth, but his eyes sharpened. Amelia explained that fear would silence useful information and drive weak men into enemy hands. Control, she said, was not the same as stability. Roman did not answer immediately. The room felt the power shift again. After the meeting, Roman followed Amelia into the private corridor. His voice stayed low, but the softness had left it. He asked if she was challenging him. Amelia looked at the man who had once asked her name while her blood was still warm on the floor. She remembered how badly she had wanted his respect. She remembered the tunnel, the clinic, the kiss, the gun he took from her hand after Simon died. Then she answered carefully. She was protecting the empire. If Roman wanted obedience, he could promote another fool. If he wanted survival, he had to let the person who saw the threats speak when the threat was him. Roman's face changed. For one dangerous second, Amelia saw the crime lord beneath the lover, beneath the rescuer, beneath every soft word. Then he laughed once, quietly, without warmth. Roman told her she had become fearless. Amelia said no. Fearless people made stupid mistakes. She was afraid every day. Afraid of bullets, betrayal, failure, and the part of herself that still wanted his approval even when she knew better. That was why she survived. She did not confuse fear with weakness anymore. Roman studied her, and the corridor seemed to tighten around them. He could have punished her. He could have kissed her. He could have turned the moment into another chain. Instead, perhaps because he was smarter than pride alone, he stepped back. He told her to run the next operation her way. It sounded like permission, and Amelia almost accepted it as such. Then she corrected herself silently. It was not permission if the work had always been hers to do. The next operation proved her right. A federal task force, a Sullivan remnant, and 2 disloyal accountants were moving separately, each believing they were using the others. Roman wanted to strike first and hard. Amelia slowed the room down. She mapped the relationships, followed money instead of emotion, and let the enemies expose themselves. For 3 days, she barely slept. She built false routes, fed controlled leaks, and used Roman's reputation as bait, while keeping him physically away from the danger he would have walked into for pride. By the end of the week, the task force had bad warrants. The Sullivan remnant was fighting itself, and the accountants had delivered their own evidence into Amelia's hands. No dramatic firefight, no heroic blood on marble, just patience, intelligence, and the quiet humiliation of men who never knew they had been outplayed. Roman watched the results from the penthouse war room. For once, his expression held something close to honest admiration, without performance attached. He told Amelia he had underestimated her, even after he thought he understood her. Amelia did not answer quickly. That was the thing about being underestimated. People expected gratitude when they finally corrected themselves, as if late respect erased the years before it. She told him underestimating her had been useful. It gave her room. Roman smiled, but the smile faded when she added that she would no longer be called his shield. The room went silent. Amelia stood with her hands on the table, calm but not untouched by fear. She said shields were held by someone else. She was not an object in his hand. She was the wall, the gate, the map, and sometimes the warning he did not want to hear. No one moved. Johnson looked as if he expected Roman to explode. Roman did not. He walked around the table until he stood across from Amelia. For a moment, the entire empire seemed balanced between them. Then Roman nodded once. It was small, but everyone saw it. Amelia had forced a new truth into the room, and Roman, for reasons that were part respect, part calculation, and part something neither of them knew how to name, accepted it. Not make him safe. Amelia was not foolish enough to believe one nod could undo the way he loved control, but it changed the terms. From that day forward, when people answered to Amelia, they did not do it only because Roman had chosen her. They did it because the empire had survived by her mind, her discipline, and her refusal to look away. The men who once mocked her learned a different kind of silence. Not the cruel silence before a joke, not the awkward silence after an insult landed, but the silence of people listening because the person speaking had earned the room. Amelia did not become gentle overnight. She was still hard, still watchful, still capable of frightening decisions when survival required them. But she stopped mistaking hardness for healing. She began promoting guards others overlooked, a quiet dispatcher with perfect memory, a short driver who knew every alley in Boston, a scarred woman from a warehouse crew who could read drunk men faster than any trained officer. Amelia understood what invisibility could teach. She also understood what it could destroy. Under her command, being underestimated became a hidden advantage, not a permanent wound. Roman remained Roman. He still moved through rooms like they belonged to him. He still used charm when force would be too obvious, and silence when charm would not reach far enough. Amelia did not pretend he had transformed into a safe man, because he had learned to respect her. That would have been another kind of blindness. But she had changed the structure around him. She held the codes, the routes, the loyalties, the emergency exits, and the truth about where every body and every dollar had moved. If Roman was the face that made enemies hesitate, Amelia became the mind that made betrayal difficult. Their bond remained complicated, part loyalty, part love, part strategy, part scar tissue. But it was no longer one-sided. Roman could still reach for control. Amelia now knew how to make him feel the cost of grabbing too tightly. 1 year after the Obsidian Lounge shooting, Amelia returned to the old control room. It looked smaller than she remembered. The monitors still glowed blue. The chairs still squeaked. The air still smelled of burnt coffee and hot wires. Johnson stood near the door, no longer loud, no longer certain of himself. He started to apologize, stumbled over the words, and stopped. Amelia could have crushed him with a sentence. Once, she might have wanted to. Instead, she looked at camera 4, the same camera with the lagging motor that had started the first public crack in Johnson's confidence. It had been replaced. The blind spot was gone. Amelia told him to make sure it stayed that way. Then she walked out. Not every victory needed a speech. Sometimes leaving without needing their apology was the cleanest ending. That night, Roman found her on the penthouse balcony overlooking the harbor. The wind was cold, and the city lights shook on the black water below. He asked if she was satisfied. Amelia thought about the question for a long time. Satisfaction sounded too simple. She had power now, real power. The kind that changed how men spoke when she entered a room. She had respect, fear, money, influence, and a seat at every table where decisions were made. But she also had scars that still ached when rain came in from the water. She had memories of wanting approval from people who had not deserved the right to hurt her. She told Roman she was not satisfied. She was awake. Roman stood beside her without touching her this time. For him, that restraint was almost an answer. In the end, Amelia Hastings did not become powerful because Roman Caldwell loved her, promoted her, or called her a queen in front of dangerous men. Those things changed the room, but they did not create her. She had been building herself long before anyone applauded. Every insult taught her where people stopped looking. Every closed door taught her how to find another entrance. Every moment of being underestimated gave her space to study the people who believed they were above her. Roman gave her a throne, but Amelia learned to check the legs beneath it, the locks around it, and the hands reaching to move it. That was the difference between being chosen and being free. Being chosen depends on someone else's mood. Freedom begins when you understand your own value without needing permission to use it. Look at Amelia now. The woman they once mocked in a windowless control room became the person everyone in the syndicate had to pass through. Johnson lowered his eyes. Captains waited for her decision. Roman, for all his pride, learned that ignoring her warning was more dangerous than swallowing his ego. But the most important change was quieter than any promotion. Amelia stopped seeing herself through the eyes of people who had needed her small. She no longer mistook attention for respect or dependence for love. She understood that strength was not the absence of fear, and power was not the same as peace. She still lived in a brutal world, and she had made brutal choices. But now she knew the truth. The body they mocked had carried her through fire, and the mind they ignored had redrawn the map. That is how Amelia Hastings changed the game, not by becoming what the men around her expected, and not by begging them to understand her. She watched, she learned, she survived the jokes, the bullets, the betrayals, and the dangerous sweetness of being needed by a man who loved control as much as he loved her. Her rise was thrilling, but it was not clean. Power gave her respect. Roman gave her a stage. Pain gave her discipline. No one else could hand over the right to define what her strength meant. Never underestimate the quiet person in the room. Sometimes they are not silent because they are weak. Sometimes they are listening, counting, remembering, and waiting for the moment when every careless person around them finally realizes they were never invisible at all. Every mafia boss story is not only about power, money, revenge, or fear. Beneath the violence and darkness, there is often a painful human lesson about choices, consequences, loyalty, family, and the price of ambition. This story reminds us that no matter how powerful a person becomes, no one can escape the truth forever. Hundreds of people, and make others tremble at the sound of his name. But if his heart is empty, his victory is never complete. The mafia boss in this story represents a man who built his life on control. He believed that fear was stronger than love, that silence was safer than honesty, and that power could protect him from pain. For years, he may have won every battle in the streets, in business, and among his enemies. But the most important battle was never outside him. It was inside his own heart. That is where he truly lost himself. One of the most meaningful lessons from this story is that power without morality becomes a prison. Many people dream of becoming rich, respected, or feared. They think success means having control over others. But real success is not measured by how many people obey you. It is measured by how many lives you protect, how much peace you create, and how much good remains after you are gone. The mafia boss had money, influence, and protection, but he did not have peace. His life shows us that a person can be surrounded by luxury and still feel completely alone. Another important lesson is that loyalty is valuable, but blind loyalty can destroy lives. In the world of crime, loyalty is often treated like the highest law. People are expected to follow orders without question. Never mean giving up your conscience. A loyal person does not simply protect someone else's secrets. A loyal person also has the courage to stop someone from destroying themselves. This story teaches us that loyalty without honesty is dangerous. Real loyalty should be connected to truth, respect, and moral responsibility. The story also shows the heavy cost of revenge. Revenge often feels powerful in the beginning. It gives a person the illusion that pain can be answered with pain, but revenge rarely heals anything. Instead, it creates a chain of suffering that keeps growing. One act of revenge leads to another. One betrayal leads to another. In the end, everyone loses something. The mafia boss may have believed that revenge would restore his honor, but what it truly did was steal his humanity piece by piece. This is a powerful reminder that forgiveness is not weakness. Sometimes, forgiveness is the strongest decision a person can make because it breaks the cycle of hatred. Family is another central lesson in this kind of story. Many mafia bosses claim they do everything for family. They say they commit crimes to protect the people they love. But protection without honesty can become another form of harm. A family does not only need money or security. A family needs trust, emotional safety, and love that is not poisoned by fear. If a father, husband, brother, or son becomes powerful but loses the ability to show tenderness, then his family may live in a beautiful house, but still feel trapped inside it. This story reminds us that children and loved ones often pay the price for the choices of powerful men. The mafia boss may think his decisions only affect his enemies, but every secret, every violent act, and every betrayal leaves a shadow over the innocent people around him. That is why one of the strongest educational messages is this: before making a decision, we must ask ourselves who will suffer because of it. A selfish choice may bring temporary success, but it can create long-term pain for the people we love most. Another meaningful point is the danger of pride. Pride can make a person refuse to apologize, refuse to change, and refuse to admit they are wrong. The mafia boss may have spent years believing that saying sorry would make him look weak, but in reality, the ability to apologize is a sign of strength. It takes courage to face the damage we have caused. It takes maturity to admit that we hurt someone, and it takes true character to change before it is too late. The story also teaches that redemption is possible, but it always requires sacrifice. A person cannot simply say they have changed. They must prove it through action. Redemption means accepting responsibility, protecting the innocent, telling the truth, and sometimes losing everything that was built on lies. For a mafia boss, redemption may mean walking away from power, exposing corruption, saving someone he once endangered, or choosing love over control. The path to redemption is painful, because it forces a person to confront the worst parts of themselves. But it is also the only path that can lead to peace. From a human perspective, this story is powerful because it shows that even the hardest heart can still feel pain. Behind the cold eyes of a mafia boss, there may be regret, loneliness, childhood wounds, or a deep fear of being betrayed. This does not excuse his actions, but it helps us understand that broken people often break others when they never learn how to heal. The educational value here is important. Pain should not become an excuse to hurt people. Instead, pain should become a reason to grow, to seek wisdom, and to choose a better path. For viewers, the lesson is not to admire the criminal lifestyle, but to understand its emptiness. The suits, cars, mansions, and power may look attractive from the outside, but behind them there is often fear, guilt, and loss. A life built on violence can never bring true happiness. A life built on lies can never bring true freedom. And a life built on fear can never create real love. In the end, the story of a mafia boss is really a warning. It warns us that every choice has a consequence. It warns us that money cannot buy peace. It warns us that fear cannot replace respect. It warns us that revenge cannot heal a wounded heart. Most importantly, it reminds us that the greatest power a person can have is not the power to control others, but the power to control themselves. The deepest lesson is simple but meaningful. Choose character over pride, love over control, truth over silence, and forgiveness over revenge. No matter how dark a person's past may be, change is possible when they are willing to face the truth. But the longer someone waits, the higher the price becomes. A mafia boss may win the streets, defeat his enemies, and build an empire, but if he loses his soul, he has lost everything. True strength is not found in violence. True strength is found in responsibility, compassion, humility, and the courage to become better before it is too late.